It is a pleasure to welcome Her Excellency Ambassador Anne Anderson, the permanent Ireland's representative to the United Nations at the Centre on Global Economic Governance, on the occasion of a panel discussion on Europe. Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah. I enjoyed the discussion very much.
Thank you very much. I'd like to first of all thank you for your contribution. It was wonderful. We've already received feedback that everybody was very excited. So I was wondering if we could maybe just summarize briefly, what are your main views on where Europe is and where it's likely to be heading in terms of the political and economic situation?
Clearly, Europe has serious challenges to confront. There is no question about that. They were well aired on the podium and in the room this evening. And nobody wants to minimize those challenges. But what I think is important is to assert an appropriate optimism about where Europe is headed. Sometimes, particularly here in the United States, the discourse can be dominated by people perhaps from an economic background or people who have not really directly lived the European experience. And the view they take can sometimes be a little absolutist about what's happening in Europe, can underestimate the absolute determination that there is in Europe to get through this crisis and to go on and to build a better Europe.
Some of them will admit that Europe has incredible potential and will characterize it as what they would see a lack of will. Do you share that, or did you feel the will is there, it just has not manifested itself strongly or rapidly, perhaps as rapidly as these people would have expected?
I do think the will is there. The commitment to save the euro and to save the European project is very, very strongly ingrained and embedded in Europe. The issues are extremely complex, and a lot of the commentators, especially academic commentators sometimes, they hunger for quick, clean, neat solutions. Europe has rarely evolved in that way. Sometimes the progress has been a little crab-like, but it still moves forward. And often our solutions are compromises, and they're a little bit untidy or a little bit inelegant, but they are what is required to take us forward. So yes, we need to recognize the criticisms, and it is true, and I was very ready to accept it there in our discussion on the podium, that in addressing the crisis within the Eurozone, there were missteps, misdiagnosis. But what I really believe is that the recognition of the scope of the problem is now there, and the determination to confront it in a really comprehensive way is there.
Yeah, no, that's very good. And so you feel that the distinction or differences of opinions that one sometimes sees, say, between countries such as Germany or the core countries and the countries that are in the periphery, especially the Mediterranean countries, but even Ireland, let's say, in some points, that those are bridgeable, that in some sense they will not prevent a solution to be found?
I think they are, because again, I think there is a certain black and white quality to the discourse. And so many of the commentators say, austerity, bad, growth, good. Germany, obsessed with austerity. The peripheral countries, unhappy with austerity and just insistent on a growth solution. I think, I mean, like all caricatures, of course, it's not without elements of truth. That's why we recognize the picture. But I don't think it's fair either to Germany and the austerity camp, or to countries like Ireland or some of the other peripheral countries. I'll come back in a moment to my difficulty with the word peripheral.
Yes, yes. Well, there have been even less pleasant words that were used. But
I know. We've all heard about the pigs and all of that. Exactly. But I think we've certainly, hopefully got well beyond, because that sort of lexicon is definitely not helpful. But I think, I mean, it's obvious the answer has to be some mixture of austerity and growth. Austerity is such an unattractive label, obviously. Yeah. Who's going to be out saying, yes, we're for austerity? austerity. But what austerity actually is trying to live within our means, trying to engage in a programme of structural reforms. And we in Ireland, we live by our exports, we live by our competitiveness. We needed reforms to bring us back to a more competitive structure that we have now. Of course, we never wanted to come this route. Of course, people are suffering, people are unhappy, there's no question. But we do recognise that even if it's austerity under a different label, that some of these measures are necessary. And equally, I don't think it's fair to say that Germany is entirely austerity obsessed and has no room whatsoever in its thinking for growth. The real question is finding the workable, appropriate blend. And yes, the emphasis is different, and we've seen that discussion between Hollande and Merkel, for example. You see it reproduced in many places in Europe. But it's not the absolute black and white that you sometimes hear in the discourse here, nor can the answer be an absolutist one. Because those of us who have experienced these problems, we need a degree of structural reform to get back on track, just as Germany needs to be open to the idea that growth is part of the answer.
Looking at Ireland, of course, it's been such a model country, right? The tiger and so on. Do you see it becoming a tiger again in the near future, medium term? Where do you see it standing, and how would you assess the situation?
I don't want to give you an overly rosy picture, although it's a temptation, of course, as an ambassador, it's always a temptation to do that. When you look at the kind of phenomenal growth figures that we had during the Celtic Tiger years, it would be unrealistic for me to posit that we're going to return to those kind of growth figures anytime soon. We are out of recession, which is a very big, very important thing. We're back in very modest growth figures. But if you like, the way I often think about Ireland is that we have essentially a healthy body. Exports are good, foreign investment is good, the workforce is highly educated. It's a very flexible working environment. So we have a healthy body that had a diseased limb, and that was our banking system. Yes, yes. And of course, the problem has been to ensure that that didn't infect and contaminate the rest of the healthy body. So I think what you see almost in medical terms is that the essential health of the body is reasserting itself, that we have been able to address the serious problems that there were in one of our limbs. But I think what you see is a healthy body basically fighting back. And indeed the overall, again to come back to my comments about Ireland having recovered competitiveness, the overall body is now more fighting fit than it was during the Celtic Tiger years.
Yes, that is definitely true. Now, what about, we didn't have a chance to give you a possibility of responding to the comment that was raised at the end by Kemal Dervish, and that's the issue of differential taxation. Where do you see Ireland standing on that going forward? Will it retain the very different and competitive system of corporate taxes, or will it gravitate a little bit more towards what we observe in Europe? Will Europe gravitate more towards Ireland? What is your prediction?
Well, my prediction and my certainty is that Ireland will retain for the foreseeable future its current tax rates. The government has been absolutely unambiguous on that. We would be perfectly happy to see the rest of Europe gravitate in that direction because we think healthy tax competition is part of the overall answer to the competitiveness issue. And I would also make the point that ours is a very low rate, but it's very transparent. It's very clear. Some of the other countries have maybe much higher rates, but there is all sorts of exceptions and loopholes, yes, and so on. Yes. We're very clear and very, very transparent in our approach to corporate taxation. The other thing is that I think there is often an undue focus on this, that people look at Ireland and wonder what it is that is contributing to the Irish success and the Irish success in attracting foreign investment. And time again, when the investors have been questioned, the new investors, the repeat investors, they always indicate a mix of factors. It's the educated, flexible workforce, It's being an English language foothold within the European Union. It's a very attractive place for people to locate. And when I was ambassador in France, I sometimes questioned French companies who were thinking of setting up elsewhere, and we might have been in competition with, let's say, Singapore or Israel or somewhere for an investment. And I was impressed by, so often when other things were broadly equal, because of course everybody's incentivizing foreign investment, what was decisive was the fact that they felt their management and their workforce would be happy in Ireland. So it's a big mix of factors, and it's a radical oversimplification to say that it's just our low corporate tax rate is acting as a draw.
Well, we wish Ireland the best, and thank you again for coming for the panel and for sharing with us your views.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your good wishes for my country also.
Thank you.
Thank you.